Story 7. The Silver Key. Venice, Italy. It was a warm, sunny day in Venice. Enzo was walking alongside a canal on his way home from school. He was deep in thought and kept his eyes on the ground as he passed the tourists, crowded around taking pictures. Suddenly, he saw it. His eyes grew wide with amazement. Could it be what he thought it was? What his grandfather had told him about all those years ago? He walked over to it and picked it up. It was a silver key that glistened in the sunlight. The top of the key had a lion carved into it. He looked around to see if anyone had seen him, and then put the key into his pocket and rushed back home. Meanwhile, in their village, Lucy and Jonathan had finished their lunch at home when they looked out and saw the bunny sitting by the front gate. They knew the bunny had been sent by the magic tree, who had a new adventure for them. They quickly finished their lunch and rushed over to the forest. "Welcome," said the magic tree. "There is a boy in Venice, Italy, who needs your help. He will explain once you get there." "We just studied about Venice in school. I cannot wait to go there," replied Lucy, jumping up and down with excitement. As they had done several times before, they pulled the tree's lower branch and went inside the trunk. There, they found the backpack waiting for them. They put it on, closed their eyes, and were off for their adventure. When they opened their eyes, they were in the center of a large square. "This is the Piazza San Marco," said Lucy. "In English, it's called the St. Mark's Square. This is one of the most famous landmarks in Venice." They looked around, admiring the beautiful buildings that surrounded the square. There were cafes all around with people sitting and enjoying their coffee. Suddenly, they heard a voice call out to them. They turned and saw a boy running up to them. "Hello, Lucy and Jonathan," he said, panting. "My name is Enzo. The magic tree has told me all about you. I hope you can help me solve a mystery." "We'll be glad to help you," replied Lucy. They started walking away from the square. "Let's take a vaporetto," said Enzo. "This is the water bus we use to go from place to place." They got into the water bus, a large boat, and found empty seats in the back where they could look out. Lucy and Jonathan marveled at the beautiful old houses they passed as the water bus slowly made its way through the waterways called canals. The houses were mostly old, but still looked grand with their balconies jutting out onto the water. "I have never seen so many canals before," said Jonathan. "Why does Venice have so many?" "Venice is a collection of islands, and these canals are like our roads. We have to use them to go from place to place," replied Enzo. "Oh, here's our stop. We need to get off." They got off and stepped onto a small square. Enzo motioned for them to follow him, and they entered a cafe. "Do you like tiramisu?" he asked. "I've only had it once," replied Lucy. "It is said that tiramisu was invented here in Venice," said Enzo, ordering one for each of them. They sat in silence, enjoying the coffee-flavored dessert. Lucy and Enzo had taken their second bite when they looked over and saw Jonathan's empty plate. "You really should savor it more," said Lucy. You won't get the full taste unless you eat it slowly. Let me get you another one, said Enzo, getting up and heading to the shop counter. Now do you know why I finished so quickly? Said Jonathan, grinning. Lucy shook her head, very familiar with her little brother's love for dessert. Once Enzo got back, he started telling them the story of the silver key. When he was a little boy, his grandfather took him out for a walk around Venice. He explained how their family had lived in Venice for generations. They were gondoliers by trade. What's that? Asked Jonathan. You see those boats? Said Enzo, pointing to a boat with curved ends. That is a gondola. In the old days in Venice, this was the way people would get around. It was like a taxi. The gondolier was the person who would stand at the back of the boat and using just one oar would take people from place to place like a taxi driver does today. Enzo continued his story. Many years ago, his grandfather once had a passenger on his gondola, an older man who came from a land far away. No one knew where he was from. He did not seem to have any money and was looking for a place to stay. Enzo's grandfather took pity on him and invited him to spend the night in his tiny house. When Enzo's grandfather got up the next morning, the older man was gone. He had left behind a letter and a small packet. He opened the packet and there was a beautiful silver key with a lion carved on the top. He then opened the letter. It read, "You have been very kind to me. Use the key to open the door and you will find my treasure. That is my gift to you. Remember, the warmer it gets, the more you will know." What was the treasure? Asked Jonathan, his eyes wide with excitement. No one knows, replied Enzo. My grandfather could not solve the puzzle, and then, within a few days, he lost the key. It fell from his pocket and no one ever saw it again. I am the only person he told the story to. No one else knows. If the key was lost a long time ago, then what's the mystery? Asked Jonathan. The mystery continues because I found the key. I wasn't even looking for it, but a few days ago, I was walking home from school and almost like magic, I saw the key on the ground. I found it years after my grandfather had lost it, said Enzo. So now that you have the key, you want to solve the clue and find the treasure? Asked Lucy. Yes, but we only have a few days. My family is moving away from Venice. We are moving to another city and I don't know when we will come back, replied Enzo. We need to find the treasure before we leave so I can give it to my grandfather. He has thought about it for many years. They sat around the table to ponder the mystery. Lucy pulled out her notebook and wrote down the clue to see if she could solve it. Do you still have the original letter with you? Asked Lucy. Yes, it's at home. Let's go there so you can see it, replied Enzo. They followed Enzo as he weaved his way through the complex maze of alleys. Occasionally, they would come across a small bridge that went over a canal. They passed pretty houses with clothes drying on the balconies and little flower pots hanging from the side. Enzo seemed to know everyone. They all waved at him and said hello. They reached Enzo's house and his mother opened the door and welcomed them in. Enzo took them to his grandfather's room and shut the door. "Thank you for coming to help solve the mystery," said Enzo's grandfather. "Here is the note the old man left me. I have kept it locked in my cupboard for all these years. I only hope we can find the treasure before we leave Venice." Lucy looked at the note. The paper was turning yellow because it was so old. While she was reading the letter, Enzo's mother knocked on the door. "Enzo, I have made lunch for your friends. Come and eat," she said. Before anyone could reply, Jonathan had opened the door and was already near the dining table. "Thank you. I'm so hungry," he said to Enzo's mother. "You poor thing. Don't worry. I've got a good meal prepared for you," she replied. Lucy turned to Enzo. "I'm not going to tell your mother that Jonathan just ate 2 tiramisus," she said, smiling. They sat down on the table and gaped at the wonderful meal in front of them. There was spaghetti, risotto, sardines, and a plate full of meats like salami and prosciutto. They ate until they felt like they were bursting. Every time their plate was empty, Enzo's mother would refill it. They ate so much that even Jonathan turned down dessert, a first for him. Lucy was a little worried that they would not be able to solve this mystery. The clue looked complicated. But then she got lucky. While helping Enzo's mother clean up, Jonathan accidentally left the note near the hot stove while putting a dish away. Lucy saw this and rushed over and picked up the note. She was about to tell Jonathan to be more careful when she saw something strange. There was other writing appearing on the note. She knew what had happened. The additional writing on the note was written in invisible ink, and the heat from the stove was revealing the writing. Lucy called Jonathan and Enzo over, and in front of them waved the paper over the hot stove. Their eyes grew wide with amazement as they saw the words forming on the paper. Once all the words were revealed, they rushed over to Enzo's grandfather's room and explained what had happened. They read out the complete note to him. "You have been very kind to me. Use the key to open the door and you will find my treasure. This is my gift to you. The warmer it gets, the more you will know. Go to the end of the snake, and from there follow the tail of the crocodile until you come to the mouth of the lion." Enzo's grandfather sat up in excitement. "All these years, I thought the clue was about the weather getting warmer. I didn't know it meant that the warmer the paper got, the more writing would be revealed. I now know what the clues mean," he exclaimed. "Please explain, as I have no idea what any of this means," said Lucy. "The clue says to go to the end of the snake. The snake is the Grand Canal in Venice. This is the main waterway, which is like our main road that curls all the way through Venice. If you look at it from above, it looks like a snake. The note asks us to go to the end of the snake," said Enzo's grandfather. "But Grandpa, there are 2 ends to the Grand Canal. Which end should we go to?" asked Enzo. Grandpa smiled. That is where the next clue helps, he said. It says to follow the tail of the crocodile. At one end of the Grand Canal in St. Mark's Square is a statue of St. Theodore standing on a crocodile. You will need to follow the tail of the crocodile. The last clue tells us to go to the mouth of the lion. I don't know where this is, but you need to find that out. Hurry! After all these years, I hope we can find the treasure. The three adventurers rushed out and went back to St. Mark's Square on the water bus. Once they got out, they could spot the statue with the crocodile. They started walking in the direction the crocodile's tail was pointed. Jonathan, you look to the right. Enzo, you look to the left, and I'll look straight ahead, said Lucy. Remember, we're looking for a lion's mouth, and it might have a keyhole in it. They walked along the street, their eyes peeled, searching for the final piece of the mystery. Suddenly, Jonathan started running. The other two followed him, their hearts beating faster, thinking he had found something. But it was just a statue of a cat. Embarrassed, Jonathan continued walking ahead. They reached the end of the street and were discouraged because they did not find anything. They sat on a bench to plan their next moves. As they were seated, a group of tourists with a guide assembled behind them. The guide was speaking. Lucy and Jonathan were busy planning where to go next when Jonathan excitedly started pointing towards the group. They turned and listened as the guide spoke. The tour guide continued his explanation. As I described, many centuries ago, the rulers of Venice installed these boxes all over the city for citizens to put in complaints. These were like mailboxes, but built into a wall and with the shape of a lion's head in front of it. This is an example of a box with a lion's head, he said. The three of them turned and saw the tour guide pointing towards a wall, but could not tell what he was pointing at. But it doesn't look like a lion at all, said a little girl in the crowd. That's because it is hundreds of years old, and over time it has lost its shape. No one has used these for a few hundred years, replied the tour guide. The tour group started walking away towards their next stop. As soon as they had passed, Jonathan ran towards the wall that the tour guide had pointed to. The other two followed shortly behind. They came upon a carved image that but they had missed it before because it did not look like a lion's head. But in looking closely, they could see where the lion's mane had been carved. Enzo put his finger into the lion's mouth and felt around and turned and looked at Lucy and Jonathan. I think I feel a keyhole, he said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out the silver key. He pushed the key into the lion's mouth and twisted about until it went in. Then he turned it, but it would not turn. Jonathan stepped in and tried twisting it the other way, and it worked. They heard a clicking sound, and then a panel in the wall creaked open. They peered inside, and it was almost empty, but at the back they could see a velvet bag about the size of an orange. The bag was tied on the top with a string. They grabbed the bag, looked around to make sure no one had seen them, then closed the door and locked it. They didn't dare look inside the bag while they were out in the open. They rushed back, jumped onto the water bus, and were soon back in Enzo's home. They went into Grandpa's room. "Did you find it?" he asked excitedly. No one said a word. Enzo quietly pulled out the velvet bag and handed it to his grandfather. "You open it. You have waited all these years," he said. His hands trembling, Grandpa pulled on the thick string and the top of the bag opened. He turned it upside down and the contents tumbled out. They all stood speechless, looking as gold coins fell on the bed. He opened his arms and Enzo rushed in to give his grandpa a big hug. "Our work here is done," said Lucy. They said their goodbyes and, as they had done in their previous adventures, opened the backpack and pulled out the golden egg. They held hands, closed their eyes, and twisted the top of the egg. When they opened their eyes, they were back at home. The end. Now, for some fun facts on Venice. These fun facts can also be found at the bottom of the written version of the story. Venice is located in Italy and is on the continent of Europe. Venice is on a group of 118 islands separated by canals and linked by over 400 bridges. The 3 stripes on the Italian flag are all equal in size. The green stripe is always placed nearest to the flag post when the flag is hoisted. "260,000 people live in Venice. However, the city gets more than 20 million visitors a year. Venice is slowly sinking at the rate of 1 to 2 millimeters a year. One of the first women to graduate with a university degree was from Venice. Elena Lucrezia Corner received a Doctor of Philosophy degree in 1678. Cycles, skateboards, or rollerblades are not allowed in Venice. Gondolas can only be black. It is the law in Venice. That's it for this week. See you next week.